Folks, welcome to the weekend. Happy Friday to you. I trust that you've had a good week and that you've been able to get some good science fiction reading done. And on that topic, what have I been reading? I read Doomsday book by Connie Willis, and this is the first of Connie Willis's Oxford time travel books, and there are 4 novels and I think possibly a few short stories as well. In slightly unorthodox fashion, this is the third of the 4 that I've read, Blackout and All Clear being amongst my favourite reads of 2023. She really did a number on me with those books, and I was somewhat prepared for something similar with Doomsday book. The structure of the book is interesting. There are braided plot threads mirrored to a degree. One is in 2050s Oxford, the other in the 14th century village of Stengate, which is just about within the sound of Oxford's church bells. Kivrin is preparing to travel back to the Dark Ages, but Professor Dunworthy is fretting. He believes that Gilchrist, the acting head of the history faculty, has made shortcut after shortcut in preparation and is concerned for Kivrin's safety. Still, back she goes, and all appears to be well. A celebratory pint is had in the nearby pub, but soon Badri, the technician, appears, muttering about something being wrong. They troop off back to the lab with Badri staggering ahead down a busy high street full of Christmas shoppers. We're about to find out what went wrong when Badri keels over, suffering from something. We expect Kivrin to be subject to all sorts of 14th century pestilence, although she has been immunised, but instead it's the 2050s that gets the epidemic and associated quarantine. We get the impression that there's been at least one serious pandemic in recent memory, and the response to any potential repeat is swift. So we get fraught epidemic-related goings-on in 2050s Oxford, with Dunworthy attempting to get somebody to replace Badri as tech to find out what the hell went wrong with Kivrin's time travel. But it's Christmas vacation, the students have all gone home, and much of the staff too, and the quarantine makes it all very difficult to bring anyone back. What to do? Back in the 1320s, Kivrin has arrived roughly where she's expected to be, but she's ill, seriously ill. She's nursed to the extent that anyone can be nursed in the 1320s by the residents of the local manor house. Her translator tech is malfunctioning though. She can't understand or be understood. What with her fever and raving in a strange language, she is in danger of being burnt for a witch. I was predisposed to enjoy this book after my experience with the other 2, and I wasn't disappointed in the main. There were some of the same irritations. At times, Connie Willis insists on placing barrier after barrier in front of her protagonists, and on occasion I just wanted them to be allowed to get the hell on with whatever it was that they were trying to do. Mainly, though, it is an engaging read. I liked Kivrin and enjoyed her experiences in the 14th century. As readers, we get a front row seat to the main event of that time period, the Black Death, and it's pretty harrowing stuff in general, with some particularly poignant scenes which tugged at the old heartstrings. I didn't sob like a baby like I did to the final section of All Clear, but once or twice I might have had something in my eye, and if you've read it, you probably know to what I'm referring. Connie Willis does a ton of research for her books, and it shows, particularly in the 14th century thread. I enjoyed that depth of detail. It makes for a really believable and immersive setting. The 2050s thread maybe suffers a bit from being written in 1992, before the internet really came along. Willis is rather restrained in her predictions about the technology available to Dunworthy and his team, but that's a minor criticism, I think. I liked Dunworthy as a character, and Colin, the grandnephew of one of Dunworthy's team, who manages to bust his way through the quarantine to be with his great aunt at Christmas. Colin features large in the 2 books set in World War II that I have read, so I was happy to see a younger version of him appear in this one. I listened to this on audiobook, and I thought that the narration, which was done by Jenny Sterling, was done very well, adding to my general enjoyment. I thought that she really brought the story to life. I think if you like a time travel book complete with the dangers of paradoxes or maybe a bit of historical fiction, then I think Doomsday book should work well for you too. Overall, I found it to be a really enjoyable read, and perhaps that's not surprising given that it won both the Hugo and the Nebula Awards back in the day. Next, also on audiobook, I read Colossus by D.F. Jones, which was first published in 1966. Set at some unspecified time in the future, but not that far, I think. Professor Forbin has been running a huge program to build the world's biggest, most powerful, most advanced computer, Colossus. Now, at the beginning of the book, Forbin warns the president that he's a bit worried about potential side effects, unexpected consequences from switching the damn thing on. Of course, these worries are duly ignored, and Colossus is switched on regardless, and handed the keys to the entire US military, including the strategic nuclear weapons. Nothing bad can come of this, right? Well, what do you think? Colossus immediately declares that there's another similar system giving coordinates in the Soviet Union, and it quickly transpires that the Soviets do indeed have their own powerful computer, Guardian. Colossus then makes the first of many demands: connect me to Guardian or else. And bearing in mind that Colossus has its virtual fingers on the nuclear button, these are not empty threats. The book is the story of Colossus/Guardian becoming self-aware, making more and more demands, reducing the scientists to the role of caretakers. The pesky humans have to figure out ways to outwit Colossus, but that might prove to be extremely challenging. As Forbin says to the president early on, we might have built it better than we thought. No shit, Sherlock. However, there is one potential weakness to exploit, and that's that Colossus has no concept of emotion. There are definite Skynet vibes, and with all the AI noise at the moment, a frisson of the familiar. Colossus, for example, has been fed thousands of novels, plays and poems, published scientific papers, textbooks, you name it. All, I imagine, without the copyright permission of its authors. Written in 1966, is even more dated than Doomsday book in terms of the technology available to these scientists of the future. For example, communication with Colossus is via a teletype machine. Forbin and his team could invent a giant all-powerful computer, but not, it appears, a more effective user interface. But, fortunately, Colossus soon sorts them out, inventing one for himself. Colossus makes bigger and bigger demands with bigger and bigger threats, and carrying them out in one or two explosive cases. But what does it want? Well, it's all in our best interests, of course, but only if we submit to its total control. I gather that there was a film made of this in 1970, Colossus, the Forbin Project, which, from a brief description on Wikipedia, seems to follow the plot of the book pretty closely. And the book is B-movie stuff, really. It moved along well enough, and it was a quick listen, about 5 hours, I think. If you have a copy kicking around, or if you have an Audible account, it's worth a read, but I don't know that I'd seek it out specially. A glutton for punishment, I went back to the Amarantine Spectrum for more. I read the first book, The Promise of the Child, in January, and I was impressed. It's not an easy read, though, for sure, and not a book where you can check your brain in at the door. Having been through that, and with a few weeks' rest, I girded my loins for book 2, The Weight of the World. Toner provides a handy 2-page recap of the first book, and when I was reading it, I was thinking, really? I don't remember that. And I actually had to go back and read the last 40 or 50 pages of the first book, just to kind of refresh my memory and get back in the zone. We continue on more or less from where we left off in the first book. Via multiple plot threads, we explore the exquisitely described universe of the Amarantine Prefecture and the Prism Investiture, territories ceded to the Prism centuries earlier by the Amarantine. What, I hear you ask, are the Prism? Well, I told you that last time. It's a motley collection of variant humans, from the Lilliputian Onyx to the much larger Melius and all points in between. Billions, trillions of them scattered across known space on planets, but mainly hollowed out moons and tethered moons and all manner of strange, cobbled together, almost steampunk spaceships. The Amarantine, although near immortal, are dwindling in number as they either die off, are killed, or go insane with great age. And their grip on power is slipping. The Prism are snapping at their heels, and there are power plays amongst the Amarantine in progress. It does continue to be a demanding read. Like the first volume, it took me over a week to get through the book. That in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, other than messing around with my planned TBR pile. I think, though, a book that I was enjoying less or was less impressed with might have got the DNF treatment if it was taking me that long to wade through. As I said, there are several plot threads, many with characters recurring from book 1, plus one significant addition that I suspect will grow in importance as Toner closes out the story in the third book. This might be down to me, but as yet it's not entirely clear what the link between the characters are and the plot threads that they inhabit. There's a distinct lack of connective tissue. I assume, or rather I hope, that this all crashes together in a glorious crescendo in book 3. So it's not for the story, the through plot, that you visit with these books, or at least not yet. Last time around, I couldn't really think of anything to compare the books to. The closest I can come up with is The Book of the New Sun, Gene Wolfe's many-layered masterpiece. There's a similar sense of the deep past, of accumulations of lives and history that we only glimpse or see through the distortions of legend. A similar sense of having no idea where it was going, the strong sense that you might be missing something, the certainty that a reread or 5 might be necessary. Those are the similarities that I see. Yeah, I did enjoy myself. Once again, the world building is something extraordinary. It's dense and rich, lush and weird, raising many more questions than it answered. So I enjoyed it, but I was also relieved to finish it. I didn't think that I would quite finish Embassytown this week, but it was a compulsive read that I powered through. This book is about language, about the constraints and restraints that puts on our thinking. It's about truth and lies, and it's also about the dangers of addiction and the all too fragile boundary between order and chaos. Embassytown, then, is a human enclave in an otherwise alien city on the planet Ariaka. The Ariakai, or the hosts, are completely unable to comprehend our speech, and we suspect that they don't even recognise our monkey noises as speech, as communication. Avis Benna Cho, the ABC of the story, is our narrator and protagonist, our guide to Embassytown and the hosts. When she was young, Avis was turned into a simile, a living element of the Ariake language. In a ceremony that she barely understands and only dimly remembers, she has become the girl who was hurt and ate what she was given. Before she can even understand language with a capital L, she is forever part of it. Being something and not something, like something but not it, is not just incomprehensible to the hosts. Their brains just can't do it. They know only literal truth. They cannot lie, no matter how innocuous the form of that lie, like a simile or a metaphor. Humans are perhaps uniquely qualified to teach them how. Our language is built to do it. After all, it's hardwired into us. But first we need to communicate. Ambassadors are bred, developed. Pairs of identical and empathically linked humans are trained to speak simultaneously to mimic the speech patterns of the hosts who have double tongues. Finally, we can communicate with the hosts, or some of us can. Bremen, the distant polity of which Embassytown is a colony, sends a new ambassador, one not a result of the local programme. Ezra, it's made up of two people, Ez and Ra, looks different from the off. They're not identical twins for a start. Their Laurel and Hardy appearance generating much disquiet and discussion. Their first attempt at communicating with the hosts does not go well, and that's an understatement. Something is subtly wrong with Ezra's speech pattern, the result of which is a linguistic narcotic high, a mainlining of speech heroin directly into the brains of the nearby hosts. They are instant addicts with highly destabilising effects. To add to the fun, the hosts are enthusiastic users of high biotech. Their entire economy is based on it. Even the supply of essentials to Embassytown relies on this. Food isn't shipped or transported by road, but instead by a biological pipeline via peristalsis, an esophageal supply of food and other useful products. And along with the hosts themselves, the hosts' biological houses, their tools and machinery also become dependent addicts. The whole place rapidly goes to pot, putting the dependent human population of Embassytown at severe risk. Think of the most drug-blighted neighbourhood you can, your worst fever dream of deprivation, wasted people that forget to eat, hollow eyes, desperation and violence, and then multiply by 10 and extend it to the very fabric of the neighbourhood, all the result of some well-meaning attempts to shortcut a carefully crafted communication mechanism. Embassytown is the tale of this fall and the many attempts to rectify the situation, with Avis increasingly at the centre of it all. She is no longer a mere simile, she becomes a power broker in her own right. I think Embassytown is a creative tour de force. Ursula Le Guin describes it, and I think quite rightly, as a fully achieved work of art. I loved the language of the book, the sheer craft of it. It's not an easy start. Mieville bombards us with new words, invented words, borrowed, merged. The context gives us clues, but we're left to figure it out. I think it's clever. It's very clever, I think, but not that arch, annoying kind of clever, the performative clever. He's not showing off. It's not clever for its own sake, not too clever for its own good. It's the right kind of clever. The only thing I can think of to compare it to is Stories of Your Life by Ted Chiang, which was the novella that became the movie Arrival. There's a similar theme of language constraining thought patterns, and I think that they're similarly well done. I thought it was marvellous, and I thoroughly recommend it. So that, I think, was a pretty good week. Tell me, what have you been up to? What have you been reading? Is there anything that you'd specifically recommend? Do let us know in the comments. As always, it's always really interesting to hear from you. Next, let's go to Indy Corner. This is a sporadic feature where I showcase a self-published novel, or if not self-published, then at least not traditionally published. I get emails from time to time asking me to review a novel on my channel, and rather than overcommit myself when I already have an actual mountain of books to read, I will instead share just a few details here in Indy Corner. First up is The Man Who Saw Seconds by Alex Boldizar, which apparently has been nominated for a Locus Award, and he's keeping august company. So have Cory Doctorow, Adrian Tchaikovsky and James S.A. Corey, author of The Expanse and latterly The Mercy of Gods. The novel follows Preble Jefferson, who can see just 5 seconds into the future when a tragic encounter on a New York subway forces him to use this ability against the NYPD. He becomes the target of various government agencies, and what begins as a relentless manhunt evolves into a deeper exploration of how even a small window into the future can disrupt everything we understand about choice, consequence, and the complexities of love and fear. So there's a bit of precog going on there, and it sounds like a pacey thriller. Next is SHELLI by Doug Brode, or possibly it's Brode, and on the back it says, "Meet SHELLI, a synthetic investigator that hunts defective and often dangerous machines. In its years of service to Homeland Security, SHELLI has never questioned its purpose, never doubted its mission, and never failed it in its task. Until now." Partnered with young analyst Jake August, SHELLI finds itself wading into deep political waters after a US senator is brutally murdered, presumably by a synthetic. In their search for answers, SHELLI and Jake race across America from DC's halls of powers to the vast, frigid plains of Alaska. But every clue that they discover only creates more troubling questions, because what they are hunting is neither human or machine. It's something far more dangerous, the next evolution. So that sounds a little bit like Caves of Steel meets Will Smith's version of iRobot meets Blade Runner. And it sounds quite exciting. And so important for me to say, I haven't read either of these books, so I can't vouch for them personally, but I'll put links to them in the description for this video so that you can find them easily if they have grabbed your attention. The best of luck to both Alex and Doug, both of whom have slipped me an audiobook edition of their books that might find their way into my ear rolls at some point over the coming months. Very briefly then, channel stuff next. Subs are at 4,874, which is up 121 on last week, which is a really great week. If you're one of those 121, or if you've just stumbled upon my channel for the first time today, a huge welcome to you. I'm John, and I focus on collecting, reading, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Mark Wise, who left a comment on my video from last year ranking the 9 culture novels by Ian M. Banks. That video still gets daily views, the culture seeming to be a topic that is underserved on YouTube. Anyway, Mark enjoyed the video and was pleased, as was I, that I managed to avoid any spoilers for the twists and turns that Banks adds to the plotting. Mark and I share a bit of a crush on one of the main characters in Inversions, which was also my favourite of the bunch. And we both bemoan the early demise of Ian Banks, who must surely have had several more culture books in him. I shall put a card in to link to that video if you haven't already had a chance to watch it. Thank you to Mark for taking the time to leave a comment, and as usual to the rest of you that do the same week in, week out. I do really appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel this week. I continue to be slightly limited for time just with the training that I've got to do for a long distance event that I've got in just 5 weeks. I can't believe it's only 5 weeks. But I did manage to get a video out. On Tuesday, I think it was, there was the TBR selection video for March's TBR. And as usual, I deployed the Bingo Balls of Fate and the Decision Dice of Destiny, and I'm really pleased with the books that came out of that process. So if you haven't already given that a watch, then I commend that to you. I think it's worth your time. On the book buying front, after a long period of avoiding it, I have played World of Books roulette a few times with the usual mixed results. I have added a few venture SF books and a couple of women's press science fiction books to my growing collection. And in the case of the latter, a little research tells me that there are 36 of them in total, so I still have some way to go. I've only got about 10, I think. As my book collecting matures, I am finding I'm less and less tolerant of flaws in the condition of a book. So it might be now that I can only buy books I can physically handle, or that are from a dealer whose judgment of condition is likely to be trustworthy. A couple of books have found their way across the Atlantic, and very nice they are too, and the To Behold pile now stands at 36. And I think I might normally record the next haul video this weekend, but I'm just not going to have the time to do it, and I have other video priorities anyway. But I will get to it, and that video will appear in the middle of next month, I think. Let's take a quick look ahead. As I've said, my content schedule remains patchy and will continue to be so until after the stupid running event that I've got in early April, after which I hope that normal service will be restored. Still, it won't be nothing. This coming week, I think I will be able to get the February monthly wrap-up video out, and maybe the audience recommendation video too. I have at least decided what I'm going to do with that. And then a week after that, we should have the opening lines video, which I've been going on about for ages. And that will be a simultaneous broadcast with Whitney over at Secret Source of Storycraft, who has a similar themed video ready to roll. I have in mind to do an update on the Broderick and DeFilippo 101 best novels list. Since I did the first one about 6 months ago, I've acquired over 50 of the books, and I've read another dozen or 15 maybe. So that will be part book haul, part review, and part musing on how useful such a list is to one such as I. And I still have a sequel to the Hard SF video planned, but I have made no further progress on it. It will happen. That first video is doing really well still. It's been getting daily views since its initial ramp up, and it's over the last few days, for some reason, the algorithm has seen fit to share it quite widely, and it's picking up a bunch more. So it's definitely worth doing a follow-up, I think. What will I be reading in the coming week, I hear you ask? Firstly, on audiobook, I'm going to be reading Pushing Ice by Alistair Reynolds. Strictly speaking, it's a reread, although it was quite a long time ago and I really don't remember much about it at all. I've only read the first 2 or 3 chapters. I've got plenty of it still to do, about 10 hours worth of listening, I think. And because of the stupid amount of running I've got to do this weekend, I will actually finish it. If not tomorrow on Saturday, then maybe on Sunday. But certainly I'll finish it this weekend. So that's awesome. And then when I do finish that one, I'm going to move on to These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, which is a fairly recent, I think in the last year or two, space opera. I found that this is available on my Spotify premium account. So as soon as I finish Pushing Ice, I shall at least start this. What typically happens is I run out of hours just before I finish the book. But because I have the physical book, I can just pick it up at whatever point I get to on audiobook. So I'm looking forward to that. I do like a bit of space opera. Right now on physical book, I'm about 20% of the way through Where Late the Sweet Bird Sang, which is by Kate Wilhelm, of course, and it's a book that I've been meaning to read for ages, and I'm only now just getting around to. So far so good. I'm enjoying her writing, and I think she's teed the bulk of the book up pretty nicely. And then, assuming I finish that, and I think I will, because I'm making pretty fast progress through it, then my next physical book will be The Holy Machine by Chris Beckett, which is his debut novel. I've enjoyed what I've read of his so far over the last year, 18 months, so I'm looking forward to this. I think I'm right in saying this was his debut novel. And if I finish that before this time next week, then I'll just see where the mood takes me and pick something else off my TBR pile for March. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and until next time, bye for now.